Welcome into this inaugural edition of the Beyond the Snap podcast with Kieran and Kirtan. So I think we're going to start with the transfer portal in this crazy month of December. And just before we began recording this, this is a Sunday afternoon for a little context for the listeners. So if something happened after that, we have no clue. Hasn't happened yet. So we just found out that Kyle McCord, who everyone thought was transferring from Ohio State to Nebraska, is actually going to Syracuse. So,
and that raises the question, right, about what's going to happen with the number one recruit in the nation, Dylan Raiola, or I believe that's his name, right? Because of course everyone thought that Kyle McCord's going to Nebraska because that's where he was originally saying he was going to, and then speculation arose about Dylan Raiola coming and going to Nebraska and decommitting from Georgia. And so now with Kyle McCord leaving or choosing Syracuse, does this push Dylan Raiola to commit to Nebraska?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting angle. And I would say yes. I mean, it's been revealed. I know his uncle coaches there, and I know he has ties there, it makes it a very strange choice to go to Nebraska over Georgia, even though Matt Rule looks to have that program kind of turning towards the upside. But I really think that, for right now, I think 24/7 is saying it's like 50-50 between Nebraska and Georgia. So literally a coin toss, which is crazy to me because he moved to Buford, I believe is the high school he's at right now. And to me, I don't know if it's necessarily going to be a good move for him, but I think it is. It seems like it's the move he will make. It may not be the case, and it's just looking at the notes here, and it's kind of I guess it's an inside thing among Georgia fans that they never get players from Buford, and this would be a very interesting, ironic turn because he moved to go play at Buford, obviously. So that's kind of crazy to me. But I also think I was shocked when Kyle McCord first decided to transfer because to me, that's he was the starting guy at Ohio State. It's not like he's sitting behind anybody. True. It's a good team. He's got good wide receivers, and I think a very solid offense overall that he ran there. And, of course, he did have some kind of first time doing everything mistakes, but I think there was a lot of room to improve there.
Yeah, and he did. He still performed well if you really think about it. I believe Ohio State finished as the 7th seed and losing 6 points to Michigan and in Ann Arbor. Let's keep that in mind. So for first year, let's not lie. It wasn't like he was CJ Stroud. He wasn't that guy. And the numbers all around for Ohio State were below than what they were last year. But it was a weird transfer. And that's where I agree with you, Kieran, is that I don't understand why he would choose to transfer it because, like you said, he is the starting guy. They have multiple skill positions coming in, like Jeremiah Smith, Nolan Graham. And so it does raise speculation. Is there something going on with Ohio State? And who is Ohio State going to start at quarterback next year?
Yeah, to me, I wouldn't be surprised if Kyle McCord himself was a little surprised to find him transferring. Now, obviously, this is speculation. But, to me, it seems wild, barring some kind of crazy NIL deal, which is, of course, now the ever-present thing we have to talk about. I really don't think he would have transferred, but I'm guessing that there's something internal going on behind the scenes. Maybe he doesn't like the style of offense. Maybe Ryan Day decided that after a year it wasn't a good match. And I think also, Ryan Day has lost 3 in a row to Michigan now. Yeah. So, and that's kind of the game you've got to win if you're an Ohio State Buckeyes coach. So he may be under some internal pressure to make some changes, and maybe McCord just kind of falls under that, and maybe it's not necessarily necessary, but it kind of, just fell under that kind of realm. And so another couple of interesting transfers that I think are Chip Trayanum, also out of Ohio State, who is going to Kentucky.
And he's going to join Brock Vandagrift, also the 5-star commit or the 5-star player that was at Georgia, backing up Carson Beck, right?
Yes, I believe that is correct. And I think this is contributing to the fact that I think Kentucky is a program that doesn't have maybe the flash of a Georgia, of a Bama, of a Texas even, or another big school,
Yeah.
but they've got kind of a get to work attitude, I think. And I think that's part of what Mark Stoops' program. They've always been very tough and all of that. So I think a lot of these players who played a couple of years somewhere else are now headed there to get to work and, improve their draft stock. Because I mean, that is partially what it's about. And I think that's a really kind of interesting angle. And I think it'll make Kentucky a lot better because, I mean, Chip Trayanum, he was second in rushing on the Buckeyes and rushing yards. And I mean, he looked good. He wasn't RB1 for them, but I think he'll be successful at Kentucky. And it's kind of the second transfer running back they've poached after Ray Davis played there this year.
Yeah, Kentucky is playing the what do you call it? They're playing the transfer portal really well. And then, so my wonder is, what is Kentucky's goal, and how are they getting all these guys here? So, are they using NIL and offering deals that Chip Trayanum, Kyle Vandegrift can't refuse, essentially? Or is it because of a different reason? Is it because of culture? Are they convincing these guys based off of saying, hey, like you said, we're not the flashiest team. We're not Georgia. We're not Bama. We're not LSU, for that matter. But we are still a top. We're going to be a contender every single year. We are going to fight for the SEC, and we would love for y'all to be a part of that process.
Yeah, I think Kentucky, I think that's their pitch. And I mean, this goes kind of into more of what's happening in the locker room than necessarily what we see on the field. But I think it's most definitely kind of a culture thing. And I also think Mark Stoops is doing a good job there. I mean, he's been consistent. They're in bowls. They're kind of perennially on the outside of the SEC. And I think Kentucky will continue to get better. But also, I think Kentucky is undercredited in the extremely physical league and conference that is the SEC for being a very kind of snub-nosed physical team. I think this is kind of part of that because they're able to have that grind it out, go get the work done appeal and to get to this place and to hopefully be more of a contender in the future, even though they don't have the flash, and just getting guys from the transfer portal and building up that roster year by year.
True. Okay, so let's talk about a really recent transfer, and one that I find shocking was Riley Leonard leaving the Blue Devils and now joining Notre Dame as Sam Hartman's replacement. I found that move very interesting.
Yeah, I think it's maybe Marcus Freeman is I don't know if this is where he wants to be, but it's where he is. I mean, he's taken a transfer quarterback 2 years in a row, and Sam Hartman did well, especially in the beginning of the season. But I think Notre Dame as a team, and that's not necessarily all due to Sam Hartman, but I think, football Jesus kind of fell a little short there, and Notre Dame didn't have the season that they wanted, especially after that gritty loss to Ohio State. I mean, that was a tough game. But to me, Notre Dame kind of has right now it's kind of guys in, guys out, guys in, guys out. And I think they don't have quite the solid identity that a lot of other teams have. And it doesn't feel like one team from one year to the next. Because I certainly don't think that Riley Leonard and Sam Hartman are the same. Now they're similar, but I think there's going to be a different style of football. Like Sam Hartman, he didn't really leave the pocket. He was a pocket passer. And I think Riley Leonard is willing to do that. And he's done it a lot of times in big games to get those yards and been able to put his head down and run. And so I think that's a big difference. And I just wonder if them changing the offensive scheme so much will hurt them in the long run. But another interesting transfer there is Bo Collins, a wide receiver from Clemson to Notre Dame. And I don't know what you think about that, but to me, Notre Dame is kind of they're building through the portal again, and this time next year, we'll see how it worked out. But to me, they're working on kind of building it, but they're doing it through the portal, and I'm not exactly sure how high they can go just getting portal guys.
Yeah, well, they're pulling. It's almost like Colorado right now, and how Deion Sanders keeps talking about how every single year they're going to take less and less commits as they're going to play the transfer portal. And the big question is, what is going to be the payout? So we know that Riley Leonard's going, Bo Collins is going. It's going to be I believe that's going to be a great duo and a good threat in Notre Dame. And Notre Dame's big thing is that now we have a 12-team playoff, of course. And Notre Dame, we've seen this year that they've been able to contest with Ohio State taking it down to the last play of the game for a win for Ohio State. But, Notre Dame is an independent school. And so that means they don't play in the SEC. They don't play in a Big 12 conference. So most of their games they do have tough opponents, but what I'm trying to say is they're not going to play in a conference championship that could jeopardize position for them. And so I honestly have faith in Notre Dame this season, as they also have the 9th strongest recruiting class as of right now. And so, honestly, I believe Notre Dame can sneak into that playoff 10 through 12 spot.
Yeah, and I think that is a great segue to Colorado, who lost one of their offensive linemen, Gerard Christian Lichtenhen, out of Colorado. It's not sure where he's transferring yet. And to me, this kind of represents this ongoing, I guess, battle in the trenches, if you will, for Deion Sanders, trying to find and acquire talent, mostly so far through the portal, for his program along that line of scrimmage. Like, I think it is not by any means a stretch to say that Shedeur Sanders was one of the most pressured, sacked, hurried, whatever stat you want to use, quarterbacks. And I think that had a huge effect on their offense, because obviously we've seen what he can do in the TCU game and in the Nebraska game and in those early games of the season. But his production has dropped off in Pac-12 play, and they finished, it was an improvement from last year, certainly, but not the drastic improvement I think everybody jumped on at the beginning of the season. And I'm not exactly sure if he can fix it through the portal, but, I mean, it's something that he has to do if he wants Colorado to be a contender.
Yeah, and I agree totally with that. And what I find is that Deion Sanders, I believe the only reason why they did quote-unquote better than they did last year was because of almost the hype train that they went with. Of course, when Deion Sanders came, he brought both of his sons with him. He brought one of the best players in the NCAA right now, in Travis Hunter. And so, as right now, I'm actually shocked that they didn't make a bowl game. You would expect them to do a little bit better and make a bowl game, but what I'm more shocked about is that he is Deion Sanders. He values skill positions. And so we've seen Shedeur Sanders get hit multiple times, get stopped by these actual top teams. And so the question is, can he find talent in the portal that can bolster his offensive line and his defensive line? Because right now the trenches is his problem.
Yeah, but I think it is. He had they had I believe a 5-star offensive line commitment in the 5-star offensive line commitment out of high school at Colorado. And to me, hopefully that'll help. But again, I mean, you've got 5 offensive linemen, and recruiting one is, sure, it's great. That'll help. It'll help them massively, and hopefully it'll help the culture in that offensive line room as well. But I'm not exactly sure that that's going to solve the problem for him, because I think he needs a stronger class in that area, and to not just attract the prime skill talent that he does. A couple of other interesting transfers here. Walter Nolan has announced he's leaving A&M. He was obviously he's the 5-star D-line recruit, part of that number 1 class that A&M secured. And
very top-tier talent.
Yeah, they've had huge losses in the portal so far.
Well, of course. I mean, sorry to interrupt, but that is expected, honestly, when you lose a person, Jimbo Fisher, who was, honestly, his talent may not have been coaching, but it was recruiting. That man knew how to play the recruiting game, and now, of course, you're going to lose all these recruits. Walter Nolan, honestly, I think he recorded multiple sacks this season. Is this his sophomore year, I believe?
I think so, yes.
Yeah. He is an elite level defensive lineman. He's played against top-tier talent. And now, due to the Aggies losing their head coach and replacing him with, I don't know his name off the top of my head.
Mike Elko out of Duke.
Yeah, Mike Elko. that just shows that honestly that program is not stable as of right now. It's unstable, and that's why he's leaving. And he's going to probably stay in the SEC, is my belief. I believe he's going to go to a team like Ole Miss, who's also one of those teams like Kentucky that's like they're your sneaky teams. They're going to sneak up on you this year. Or he's going to head over to Oregon, who this year had a major resurge and becoming the like 8 seed, I believe.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's big for Texas A&M. I think eventually, I have hopes for all Aggie fans because it has been rough, to say the least, for them these past years. I have hope that Mike Elko is going to do well out there. I think he's a really good coach, especially with what he's done with Duke this year. But I think it is definitely going to be an uphill battle with him. And another thing is, I was surprised that Riley Leonard didn't go to A&M following Mike Elko.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's kind of just how the transfer portal works. And then another Cam Ward out of Washington State. It's not sure where he's transferring, but he's visited Florida State and Miami, I believe.
I
And
think
so
Miami's the
has,
front runner.
yeah, and so has DJ Uyunglele,
I
their
love that
starting
name.
quarterback. I know, it's brilliant, isn't it? He is taking visits, but it's kind of thought that he's going to have to wait for Ward to commit to a program before he does. So that's a couple of other interesting transfers, but perhaps the biggest interesting transfer is that Malik Murphy, who I think is a starter at a lot of other programs, will be transferring. And more importantly, at least for the immediate future, is he's not going to be with Texas for the playoff.
And yeah, that raises speculation. Is my big question that I've been trying to figure out for these last couple of days is hypothetically Washington versus Texas in NOLA right now. They're playing third quarter, second down and 8. Quinn Ewers drops back to get a throw. He gets blindsided. He goes down. How much, as a Texas fan, Kieran, do you trust in Arch Manning to win you that game?
Yes, so this is I mean, the first time he came on the field, there was uproarious applause, and he played well. He got a touchdown in that game and drove down with all backups and was able to get the score. And I mean, I think he is clearly going to be a very competent quarterback, and we may be sitting here on this podcast in 2 years saying that, oh, maybe he's going to become a front runner for the Heisman. But I think he still needs development. But I think, yes, you're right. It does set up the very interesting situation now that he's the number 2. I'm not sure that I personally, as a Texas fan, I'm not trying to inject my bias into this, but I'm not sure that I feel better if it's Malik out there as opposed to Arch Manning versus Alabama for the title. But I think that it's definitely going to impair Texas. And we saw that they had to struggle against Kansas State. And when Malik was starting and he made some mistakes, I think he's still a solid quarterback, and I think he'll go places elsewhere. And oddly, one of the front runners for his transfer was Baylor, which is kind of interesting instead of the usual transfer suspects. So I think that it's going to raise interesting problems for Texas, especially if Quinn Ewers goes down. And as I believe Josh Pate said, Texas is right now a thumb injury away from Arch Manning leading them in a title appearance, which is both exciting and utterly terrifying as a Texas fan to think about.
But also, you got to give your flowers to Malik Murphy. I mean, if you really think about it, Texas would not even be in a position that they are in right now to have a chance at the Natty Chip if it wasn't for him. He went undefeated. Granted, like when he played, he may not play good, but he went undefeated during his span of games starting. And so you have to almost like thank the guy because though he's transferring out, though he's going to get a lot of negative responses to him leaving before the end of the season for Texas, you still have to like thank him and give him his flowers because he did put Texas in a position to essentially win the national championship if they do.
Yeah, and I think that's credit to him, and I think that him and Sark will most likely part as friends. But I mean, I think it's rough on him. I don't think he particularly desired to transfer at this exact moment, but he kind of doesn't have a choice because of the crazy current schedule. And I
Quinn
think,
Ewers, right?
yeah, and with Ewers,
Return if he does.
right, exactly. And to me, this also kind of raises, and all of this raises, I think, bigger questions about the transfer portal. Because if you think about it, there are 133 FBS teams, and they each have 22 starting spots. And that's roughly about 3,000 players that are going to start, right? And currently, there are, I think, almost 2,000 now. It's going up constantly, so it's hard to give you an exact number. But players in the transfer portal, and obviously they're all hoping to find a program where they can start. And to me, I don't know exactly what your feelings are about this, but it creates an issue where there's not enough scholarships and too many players. Because as Coach Sanders has said a lot, that the value of someone who's been through the fire, who's played in games, who has experience, is going to be greater than that of an unproven high school kid. Because even the best talent pickers in the world are going to get it wrong. They're going to get it wrong. They're going to be busts out of high school. And to me, that kind of results in there being less opportunities for really good players in high school and losing out to the transfer portal. And I also think that in general, they're going to start to see a problem here where there are too many players to find landing spots, and you'll end up with people like the backup from Alabama who's now playing lacrosse, who transferred, Tyler Buckner. He's now going to play college lacrosse. And so to me, that's kind of just a side effect of this whole portal thing, and I'm not exactly sure where you stand on that.
I mean, it's hard to disagree with Coach Prime in this situation because it is true. Would you rather go with someone who has knowledge of the game, someone who's played in the big moments, or would you risk it on someone who was quote unquote the best player in all of high school? But again, like you said, there's only 3,000 starting spots. And in total, let's say all of college football, there's only, 10,000 maybe all college football players? I don't know the total number on
Probably
that.
something like that. It depends.
But then you got to almost like double, triple that number for all high school players, all these different states playing the game, all these. So what I'm trying to go at is, I think Coach Prime is correct in the situation that you would take someone who is experienced, someone who understands the game and has played in the moments, more than someone who might have played a team or might have played against a high school that is not even better than like the best middle school. The level of play is just so crazy, that like span. So yeah, I would have to agree with Coach Prime in this situation. I would rather have a quarterback that's been in the moment, has played in the games, and understands what he's doing, more than taking a risk on someone that is essentially the best, but we really don't know how he's going to turn out.
A little conversation here about early signing day. So as it stands, and this is from 24/7, the 2024 rankings of classes, number 1 is Georgia. While there are rumors of their star quarterback, Dylan Raiola, going to Nebraska, or future star quarterback, I should say, flipping to Nebraska. They've got good talent on the defensive side of the ball coming in, including Ellis Robinson at cornerback and Justin Williams at linebacker. And I think this is a good class for Georgia. And while they missed out on the playoffs this year, I mean, I think it's going to be a strong team, more mirroring of maybe the 2022 team, especially with that new defensive talent in those rooms.
Honestly, I agree with that, but then there's also the speculation like Ellis Robinson is the top-ranked corner in the class right now and was a member of the Under Armour All-American team, and including Justin Williams, which is a very high-ranked linebacker. You can expect Kirby Smart to come in with another top-tier defense like he always does. But right now, Georgia is in the championship hangover phase right now. They're having lots of decommits, especially with the number 1 ranked player, Dylan Raiola, maybe flipping to the Cornhuskers. This could be very dangerous for Georgia, and I expect them to fall low, probably like to where Bama is sitting at 4 right now, because I think lots of players are thinking that Georgia isn't going to be a top school anymore, and they're going to end up leaving. I remember, I forgot his name, but just recently a linebacker out of Georgia has entered the transfer portal, and I feel like Georgia's going to feel that kind of pressure now to perform, or players are going to start decommitting, and Georgia's going to start falling.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the perennial. I think that's part of the difference between the Dabo Swinney's of this coaching college football world and the Nick Sabans is once you've won, once you've been on the top step, because I think arguably for certainly in 2022, Georgia was one of the most dominant teams that the sport has seen.
Yeah.
And to me, a lot of this just speaks to the fact that that Kirby Smart is going to have a time. He's going to have he certainly has his work cut out for him, keeping this team at the level that it has been, and keeping it a perennial contender. Just because, I mean, when the expectations are so high and then they're not maybe quite met, I mean, the Orange Bowl ranked 5th or 6th is not bad in terms of a finish on the season. Like most teams are going to take that. But Georgia, that's not the case. Bama, that's not the case. You know, these perennial contenders. And I think if Georgia wants to stay as a perennial contender, then Kirby Smart has to prove that Georgia still has the potential and that Georgia's going to win in the future. And I think that just kind of has to be it'll be told by time. It'll be told by the next couple of seasons. And the next recruiting ranking, speaking of another team who perhaps didn't quite meet their desired expectations this year, is Ohio State. They got a huge amount of skill talent, including Jeremiah Smith, and they've got a good defensive class coming in, including Edric Houston at edge. And to me, this class is kind of a very typical Ohio State class, lots of receivers, lots of skill talent, and I think it'll help them. But I think they still have a problem that in the list of these big names that I pulled, there is no QB, there is no quarterback.
That's exactly what I was about to bring up. There is no quarterback. I mean, Ohio State is considered by some to be wide receiver university. Jeremiah Smith is coming in. Nolan Graham is coming in. But with Kyle McCord out, who's next? Because honestly, if they're going to have to play Michigan every single year in the game, the entire Big Ten is getting reformed and reshaped. How important is that QB position to this team? Because honestly, I don't have this in my notes. I can look into this, but I don't know who is next up for Ohio State that can lead them into the game. And really, it just depends. Like, is Ohio State going to try to poach someone in the portal? I mean, some other people we haven't considered talking about was Aiden Chili. I don't know if he's fully committed yet. Dante Moore hasn't fully committed. And so is Ohio State's next move after getting this, of course, stellar recruiting class, targeting quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, Ohio State's always going to be an appealing place for a quarterback to go. But I think whether they can get one or not is going to be something that's going to define their season. Because, I mean, it's going to be if they can get a quarterback, it will be a good team. CJ Stroud is obviously now doing well in the NFL and was a very, very, very talented quarterback at Ohio State. And to me, having that quarterback and having those good receivers is a staple of that Ohio State team. And while they have become more balanced, and I think Ryan Day has said the word defense for the first time in a couple of years, because they do have a really good one this year. But I think that if they don't have a quarterback, that it's very hard to do the things that Ohio State typically does and that they're so good at, especially under Ryan Day.
And Ryan Day, I mean, he has an amazing track record, but his biggest flaw right now is, can he win the game? Can he beat Michigan? And honestly, the way Michigan's been playing under Jim Harbaugh right now, I think Ryan Day is an amazing coach, but I think Jim is just out-coaching him, essentially. And I'm going to get some speculation for this, but Jim Harbaugh, my money is on him leaving for the NFL this year and going to the Chargers. I want to hear your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I think it'll happen. It's funny because news came out a couple of weeks ago, and we'll talk about this more in the coaching segment. But Michigan is basically the new contract is essentially they're going to pay him very well. He's going to be guaranteed for, I think it's like 7 or 8 years there. But, and the big but is that he must say that he is not going to accept an offer from an NFL team this year, and he hasn't signed it yet. So to me, that leaves the door wide open. And I think that kind of perennial flirtation with the NFL by Harbaugh, it does hurt Michigan a little bit, but he is a very good coach. And I think that'll factor into it, certainly in his potential move to the NFL. The third-ranked class is Florida State. So the highlights include KJ Bolden, who is a safety, but it's possible that he could flip to Georgia in the coming days. Luke Kromenhoek, who's a QB, and Armando Blount, who's an edge. Include the highlights of their class. I think it'll be a good class for them. And we'll get into this later, but especially with their, argument of being left out of the playoff and potentially a national championship.
Yeah, we'll save that for the later segment, but Florida State undeniably had an amazing season right now, and I believe that's why a lot of recruits are starting to look at them as a real contender, and that's why KJ Bolden initially did sign with Florida State is his thing, but of course he might get flipped to Georgia, but all in all, Florida State has been having a great class. And then I also read up on DJ. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the last name because I don't want to butcher it. DJ and Cameron Ward. They also, I don't know if you read about this, but they've also tried and have gone on official visits at Florida State University because I don't know if Jordan Travis is leaving this year for the draft or what's happening with him, but I've heard some rumors that they might also make the change to Florida State.
Yeah, and I think that would be big for Florida State next year, being able to have a plug-and-play quarterback, which turned out to be not having the quarterback turned out to be, I guess, the most justifiable downfall, we'll say.
Yeah. And we'll get back to Jordan Travis in the Heisman segment.
Yep. And Alabama, with highlights including Julian Sion at QB, Ryan Williams is a wide receiver, and Jalen Mbakwe at cornerback. And I think it's a good class for Alabama. Saban is recruiting well, as he always does. And I think it'll help keep them at the top of the pile. And I think Alabama really is going to go up. With Jalen Milroe playing like he is currently and all of that, I think this class is just going to help bolster and build that second level and build that whole roster into an amazing football team. And I do not think they will be at all slouching next year.
Yeah, and Bama, I mean, I feel like they have had a great recruiting class this year. I feel like it's been a little bit worse than it was last year, but of course this is early on to the signing. But what I read up on was a lot of recruits looked at the game against Texas and said, all right, Bama, they went against Texas. Texas is a top 4 team. What was happening there? Maybe it's nothing. But then after into week 3, when they played USF at USF and won, honestly, by like a garbage time touchdown to make it like 13-6 or something like wild, a lot of recruits came out and said, like, we don't know. Has Bama fallen off now? What is Bama's identity now? Are they the proper team? And I think the good thing about Nick Saban is, as a coach, is that he's come back, he's bounced back, and he's honestly shown the most growth in a team that I've seen this year. And he finished that off with, of course, sneaking into the playoffs over FSU. Again, we'll get into that later, but I find that interesting.
Okay, so now we move on to what I think is the most singular, most important class that determines the most. Florida. So they've got DJ Lagway coming in at quarterback and Xavier Filsaime at cornerback, but who is rumored to potentially be going to Texas, which would be a huge loss for Florida and a huge win for Texas. But to me, this class if it stays together, could save Billy Napier. Or if it falls apart, it could very easily doom Billy Napier. Because I think at this moment, I wouldn't say go so far as to say hot seat, but it's definitely getting a little warm there down in Florida.
Yeah. And like you said, this is a make or break year for Billy Napier. Honestly, I know the schedules just came out, and it's bad to be a Gator fan right now. You're feeling the heat. You got that no-win November coming up. And so it's going to be a real test. I think if Florida is able to weather the storm, I think they honestly could be a really, really top-tier team. And once again, join the classes of like Bama, Georgia, and go back to the oh my god, I'm forgetting his name.
Tim Tebow.
Who's the what?
Tim Tebow.
Tim Tebow. Oh my god, yeah. Go back to the Tebow days. And so I, of course, find that interesting. But what I also find interesting is at the sixth class is U of M, Miami, being that. So I just want this to be noted within the top 10 recruiting in the top 10 recruiting teams, 3 of them are out of Florida right now. You got University of Miami, Florida, and FSU. And Miami has not secured many notable 5-star recruits, but have a plentiful of 4-star commits coming in. And most notably of that is Justin Scott. So I want your thoughts about why Miami, Florida, FSU. Do you think there's a correlation to why teams are picking Florida, like the state, to go to? Or what do you see in Miami? What do you see in Florida? What do you see in FSU that is almost appealing to these recruits?
Well, I mean, I'm going to say I think the biggest factor is the coaches, because to me, those 3 universities have coaches that at the very least on the Billy Napier side have potential and certainly can take that program to great heights. And then on the Mario Cristobal and Mike Norvell side, will take that program to great heights and have developed the program into what it is, and kind of being back on not the top, but being back on being a contender. And to me, that's the biggest thing, because I think Mario Cristobal in Miami didn't get a whole lot of credit this year, and I think they should have. I think Miami is a good football team, and to me, they're going to continue to get better, especially with this recruiting class. And I think that's big for them. And I think Mario Cristobal Miami's definitely a team to watch in 2024. And I think they'll be on the up, and especially, playing where they play in the Atlantic Coastal Conference, which is now including Pacific Coast teams, but that's a whole nother topic for another time.
Oh God, I don't even get into that right now.
They have, I mean, they've got a host of receiver talent coming in, and to me, that's going to be big for them, even as they lose quarterbacks to the portal, such as Van Dyke. And I think that is it's going to be big for Miami, and I think the state of Florida is going to be producing at least a couple of very good programs in the very near future. And I think it all comes down to coaching in the end. And the next class behind them is Oregon, with a couple of big D-line commits, including Aiden Breland and Elijah Rushing at edge. Very, very fitting name. And to me, that's a big win for them as well, because they were very disappointed with the 2 losses to Washington, it's heartbreaking. And having a Heisman quarterback and or at least Heisman caliber quarterback and not being able to get it done. And I mean, Oregon is going to it's going to be an uphill battle for them, but they got Dylan Gabriel from Oklahoma in the transfer portal. So I think Oregon still has certainly hope for next year.
Yeah, Oregon this year, I mean, honestly, it was a very disappointing ending for them. They were a top team. Honestly, this might not be notable, but this stuff I remember is that during Colorado's undefeated streak, Oregon, or they flew into Oregon. Everyone, honestly, I knew a lot of people that were picking Colorado for the Oregon game, and Oregon killed them. Oregon literally showed up and showed out during that game. And I mean, I put up the choke sign because I feel like that Washington game should not have ended the way it did. I feel like I picked Oregon to win that game because I feel like they would have learned from their past experiences. But I mean, now you're adding Dylan Gabriel, who honestly at the beginning of the year when they beat Texas, which I also want to talk about because Texas somehow swept that stuff under the rug, and
Oh
no
yeah,
one talked about
it
it.
disappeared.
We'll talk about it later, but Dylan Gabriel at that moment looked like an amazing quarterback. I mean, he's not afraid to tuck it and run. Most of the times he'll make the right read. It might take him a while, but if Oregon can honestly implement Dylan Gabriel and let him play his style of football, I really think that they will be the winners of the Big Ten next year. And Big Ten, I know, is going to be such a difficult battle because now you got to play Ohio State, you got to play Michigan, but Oregon is going into the Big Ten, and honestly, they have a chance to win it, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right, and I think it all depends on how that team kind of congeals and develops in the offseason before next year. And to me, that's a big deal. And Dylan Gabriel's former school is right below them at 8 with Oklahoma. Highlights with including some good skill talent with Taylor Tatum at running back and Zion Kearney at wide receiver, along with good commitment in David Stone at D-line. Number 9 currently is Notre Dame with the highlights including CJ Carr at quarterback, Cam Williams at wide receiver, and Kingston Villamuasa at linebacker. And then at number 10 is Texas. Highlight the class is headlined by Colin Simmons at edge. Then Ryan Wingo at cornerback and Brandon Baker at O-line also are in that mix. And especially I think that it'll be a big clash for Oklahoma. I think it bolsters a great transfer portal showing from Notre Dame and kind of gives them that, I guess, contender and the independence. And I think that's a good it's good classes for all 3 of them. But I think the biggest difference in terms of recruiting is going to be that number 10 Texas class. Because to me, they've recruited, along with Ryan Wingo, a lot of talent in the secondary, and that's been their problem. I mean, a lot of teams have passed for over 300 yards on them. Kansas State, Oklahoma, a lot of teams have been able to put up points through the air. Now, the run defense has been solid, and it may not be as solid next year with Tavondre Sweat leaving, among others. But I think that the biggest improvement in terms of even in all the teams, the biggest difference is going to be that Texas secondary next year, especially if they can flip Filsaime. And I think that's huge for Texas in the secondary and pass defense.
And I mean, Texas, honestly, they're flexing their muscle again. I mean, they have 21 commits coming in this year. And just recently, top cornerback Kobe Black committed to their team. And like you said, Ryan Wingo will make an amazing he's an amazing prospect to play wide receiver. Colin Simmons, top tier edge player, and just won the Texas UIL 6AD1 championship. But they're just well rounded. I mean, everywhere they have Brandon Baker coming into play, offensive tackle, Jeremiah Gibson, 4-star out of IMG, coming in to play running back. And I feel like Texas, they're going to be a very solid team in the SEC. And I mean, just after this year, after the recruiting, after their transfer portal, because I don't know if we talked about this, but there is a UTSA transfer. I forgot his name, but apparently he is coming into Texas. And
yes,
there is a
edge player, Trey Moore. Trey Moore, yes. Trey Moore.
Trey Moore.
Who had 14 sacks and 17 and a half tackles for loss this year. And we're going to talk about him a little more later in bowl game breakdowns. But, I mean, that's going to be big for Texas on the defensive side of the ball. And I think that I don't think Texas is going anywhere. There's a lot of talk about that Texas is going to get obliterated by the SEC, and maybe this is the burnt orange speaking, but I don't think so. I think Texas has a line of scrimmage talent. I think the biggest challenge for them is just the new stadiums and the new environments. And
I mean, I'm with you on that one. Sorry for cutting you off, but Texas, they're not going anywhere. I'm not gonna lie to you. And this is coming not from burnt orange. It's come from red. Come from dog red. And they ain't going anywhere. You beat Bama in Bama. It doesn't matter how weak of a Bama team you can consider, like say they were at the time. Texas, they've proven themselves. Sark is a great offensive mind, and I don't know about you, but Texas, they're gonna be a dominant force for the years to come, and they are back. They just can't stop winning right now.
okay, so moving on to a little talk about something that happened very recently, the Heisman Trophy presentation. And in case you've been living under a rock, Jaden Daniels took home the hardware. I think he was a very deserving winner, but who was notably, I think, missing from the list, and I think was wrongfully missing for the list, was Jordan Travis. I don't think he should have won. I think Jaden Daniels is just too much of a standout, but I think he should have been second. He had a 20 to 2 TD to interception ratio in terms of passing touchdowns. And the other thing is that he didn't have a standout receiver.
Keon Coleman, would you not consider a standout?
Well, if you look at the yards, he had 658. Johnny Wilson had 617. And those are kind of the two headline receivers, but neither of them got over 1,000 yards. If you look at, I mean, he just didn't have the same, not the same quality, but not the same performance from his weapons. I think Keon Coleman is a wonderful, wonderful receiver and has made amazing catches throughout the year. But I just think, I mean, he didn't have like Jalen Daniels had Malik Neighbors. And he didn't have that big headline, couple, 1,000 or more yard receiver in the season. He kind of spread it around. Like Jaheim Bell had 503 yards. And to me, the biggest and most damning thing is that they're trying to measure the most outstanding player and the most impactful player. And the Florida State had 36.5 points per game average, including the games where he didn't play. But in the games that he didn't play, they averaged 20 points per game. That's a 16.5 point per game difference from one player. So, I mean, and maybe that stat could be, misconstrued, but to me, that's a big, big deal. And especially the fact that you got that quantifiable measurement, that makes it kind of catapults him even higher in the Heisman rankings.
I agree totally with that. And I'm gonna come back to this question here because now you've raised an interesting question for mine. Well, the hard part to say is Jordan Travis did get injured. He got injured, I believe, what was it, 2 weeks before ACC champ game?
Yes, I believe so.
Something like that. I mean, we've seen this throughout the time. We've seen this in the NFL too. We've seen this with Carson Wentz having an outstanding year and then getting injured and not being voted for MVP. Jordan Travis, for what he did, was, I mean, it was just amazing. He was 20 for 2. He really showed that Florida State was a great team. I mean, first game heading over to LS, or playing in, I believe it was in Florida State, but beating number 6 ranked LSU. He is a top tier quarterback. But then again, you have to take in mind Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., these guys also were nominated for the Heisman. And Bo Nix, though he came up short, he was still an amazing quarterback for Oregon, still had a lot of yards, lots of touchdowns. Michael Penix, same thing. Michael Penix took a Washington team, which honestly I don't think anyone expected to be this good, and led them to a team. So the question is, how much does the committee really value the stats of these players? Or do they also take into consideration like game on the line, 2 minutes left, who do you want at quarterback to win you that game? Do they take in all these things, or do they just look at the numbers?
I mean, I think it's pretty clear that they do not look at just the numbers. Because, I mean, there's quarterbacks. There are a few that were statistically better than Jaden Daniels, but I think you can make an argument in certain corners of statistics for a few other players. But to me, they also take into account like that big game factor and what I mean. It's a known in the case of Jordan Travis, and it's an estimate in the case of Jaden Daniels. What is the change in quality of team without them? And to me, LSU was 9-3, and that's a good record. But without Jaden Daniels and that high flying LSU offense, to me they're much lower than that because their defense was not entirely sure they were present at all times during the year because there got to be some crazy scores. But their ability that was given to them by Daniels to win in a shootout, I think, is part of what. It changed the angle of the team and made him a favorite for the Heisman. And the important thing to note about the Heisman is that there are so many voters that are more casual fans of college football and don't pay attention because there's, 750 some odd voters from the press who vote on this award and that, or perhaps not quite qualified to do so. And now I don't think that necessarily resulted in a terrible selection this year, but I think that kind of brings up the question, are there too many voters? And if so, what should we do about it?
Yeah, I honestly don't really know about this one. You can make the argument for either side really. On one hand, you have there's so many voices in that room that it almost gets like mixed up like the way I try to compare the Heisman, what do you call it, the Heisman voters, is to the college football playoff committee. And I know this is a weird concept between the two, but I think there's only 13 members that are in the college football committee. And I don't know where I'm really going with this one, but all I'm trying to say is it's hard to make a decision because on one part of me, I want as many voices as I can get because no matter if they're casual, no matter if they're this and that, it's gameplay at the end of the day, and it's what you see. And so, on one hand, I like the amount of voters, but then on the other hand, there are just too many voices in a room because there's so many players where you can make a case for. And one of my questions for you is like, do you think there was any defensive players this year that should have had a case for Heisman? And so that way, I really am impartial on this committee members, how many committee members there should be. And so I think they're at a right number. I don't think the system will change for a while. And so that's where my answer resides is I just don't believe there will be a change in how many committee members there are for a while. But more importantly, I was just wondering, do you believe there was any defensive players this year, or do you believe the Heisman is turning into a MVP vote or like best offensive player?
I think it is turning into an offensive award, more specifically, a quarterback award. But I do think that there are deserving defensive players. Now, this year, if I was the only voter, there is one voter in the Heisman, and his name is Kieran McDonald, and he's going to decide, am I going to say that it was a defensive player? No. But I think that they should be considered, certainly. But this year, I don't think there was a specific, outstanding defensive player. Like there's a bunch of great players everywhere. There's, Tavondre Sweat, Mikey Sainristil, Jalen Ford had a good year. So did lots of defenses everywhere. Caleb Downs at Alabama. But to me, there wasn't a standout, kind of lockdown. Oh, he's the best at his position. You can't make an argument for anyone else. And I think that this year was a year where defenses had a huge impact on the game. Like even just look at LSU. But to me, it was more about the being able to field a whole defense than having one-star defensive player that every time you look up, he's making a tackle or getting a pick or something like that. So I think they should be considered each and every year. But to me, the picking a most outstanding defensive player and saying that he's the best player in all of college football this year, it isn't quite accurate because it was more of a whole defensive effort pitch by the whole defense instead of just one guy.
Okay, well, moving on. So we just talked about the best players. So now the best players, of course, are now going to head their way over to the NFL and start making some real money and playing the pro league. So my question and the question that we have written down here is, do you agree with the idea of opt-out players, which are players that are choosing not to participate in these bowl games to get rid of the risk of injury before their NFL combine and all this stuff? So personally, I'm okay with the opt-out. I feel like logically it makes the most sense not to damage your body before a bowl game. I feel like you've done what you've done for the team. This bowl game really is not, unless it's the Sugar Bowl, unless it's the Rose Bowl right now, you have no future, essentially, is what I'm saying. Like, these bowl games, they're just accolades. They're just stuff you can put on the wall. They're just stuff you put on the mantle. And so for top players like Brock Bowers right now, Jaden McDaniels, Caleb Williams, I almost agree with their decision of sitting out, because if I was that good of a player, I don't want to risk myself getting injured and plummeting my draft stock. So what are your ideas upon this?
Yeah, so I have to say I am going to have to separate the kind of logical reasoning thinking portion from the college football fan portion of my kind of brain and opinion. And on one side, on the college football fan side, of course, I think opt-out shouldn't be a thing. Like, obviously, I want to see Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels and Brock Bowers and Marvin Harrison and every single best player, all of the cream of the crop of the sport play in these exhibition games. But at the end of the day, that's what it is. It's an exhibition game. It's not, it's not, unless it's for the championship, you're not doing anything. I think that'll change some in the 12-team playoff, because I think if you have a shot at the national championship, then you're going to go for it. Right, you'll play. But I think that, I don't have a problem with it from the logical side, but from the college football fan side, I wish they wouldn't.
Yeah, and of course, that's the separation you have to make. You have to look at it either from their eyes, which is, I probably won't play, but you have to also look at it from your own perspective and say, every single week I want to see the best of the best go out there and play the game. And so you're right in that sense. You have to separate the two.
Moving on, and we have some bowl game breakdowns, but first we've got to react to the bowls that were played at time of recording yesterday. No huge headlining names, but I think there were still some good games and some things to be learned for next year. I think perhaps the headline was the R&L Carriers Bowl. So Jacksonville State versus the Raging Cajuns, and the true freshman kicker, was able to send it through the pipes in overtime for Jacksonville State to win. And I think that's just an incredible moment, especially in their first bowl as an FBS school in their first year. I think Jacksonville State had a really good run attack. I think they were able to, to me, the game should not have been that close.
Yeah.
Louisiana scored 3 defensive touchdowns, which is crazy. So really it's, Jacksonville State is outpacing Louisiana, but the mistakes is what holding them back and is making that game close and necessitating that Zion Webb led game tying drive late in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. That game, it was really just, it was poor. Honestly, it was an amazing showing, and props to that freshman kicker for sealing the win for Jacksonville State. But I think Jacksonville State can learn from this and really realize that, look, we need to work on ball control. We can't be giving up stupid touchdowns. But so that's the negative part of it. But the good part is that your quarterback, although he didn't do too well, he still threw for 156. He did again have 2 interceptions, which is horrible, but I mean, there's not much you can do. This is your first year as an FBS team, and just to make it to a bowl game, I mean, you have to respect that.
Yeah, I mean it's very respectable. I think it's a great season for Jacksonville State. Um, so I think probably another very interesting game was the Cure Bowl, sponsored by, of course, avocados from Mexico. Who else?
Yo,
Where Appalachian State took down Miami, Ohio, in a 13-9 game featuring as many fumbles as points it took to win. There were 13 fumbles in that game, which has got to be a record of some sort. I think it might be at least tie the FBS record. I believe 5 of which resulted in turnovers. And man, it was wet out there. It was a disaster. The field conditions were crazy, and I don't know how Appalachian State managed to pass for over 200 yards. I mean, that was a crazy performance by their quarterback. And I mean, it was a good game. It was a very kind of grinded out, don't try to give the ball away too much game. And I think Appalachian State came out on top.
yeah, that game. I mean, ball control. That's one of the biggest things that coaches talk about. Ball control, tucking the ball away, and the fact I still honestly can't wrap my head around the fact that there was 13 fumbles in a regulation game. It almost seemed like they wanted to give the ball to the other team at one point. But do you know, was it the field that was the issue? Was it weather? Did they
It
ever
was
come out
just
and say this?
it was a rainy day in Orlando, and I think also uh, the the way they painted the field with the logo, I think made it
Yeah.
slipperier because there were a lot of fumbles kind of near in that right around midfield range. And there was even one or two where they completely just missed the running back on the exchange trying to get that handoff. And the pocket with the soft handoff pocket was a little too soft and the ball hit the turf. And I mean, it was a crazy game. I think it was a really good spectacle for a bowl. I mean, it looked like the defenses played great, but they kind of just gave the ball back and forth to each other. So,
Yeah.
it was a very interesting game to watch, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I think Appalachian State is kind of always that interesting. They were favored in this one, but always that interesting upset, good story, feel good team that I think everyone likes to follow.
Yep. The giant killers.
Yeah. Along with the next team, New Mexico State, who played Fresno State in all the bowl names were all
The
running together.
Isleta, New Mexico Bowl.
Oh, okay.
Or ISLETA. Or ISLETA. Yeah.
So they lost,
Yeah.
which is very tough. Fresno State had a good team, good game. They were able to get back on track from a three loss streak and win. New Mexico State, I mean, they had very high highs, beating Auburn in honestly a blowout earlier this year. And I think it's a good season for New Mexico State and also a good season for Fresno State. And it was a interesting bowl game, but perhaps not as down to the wire as the other two.
Yeah. I mean, good showing from Fresno State taking out New Mexico State, especially in New Mexico. So home field advantage. I wasn't able to fully catch this game, but I mean, it almost looked like Fresno State was taking care of business in this game. They didn't seem too overwhelmed with the moment. They seemed like ready for the task at hand.
And in the Starco Brands LA Bowl, the UCLA Bruins, took down the Boise State Broncos, 35-22 last night, and it was a good game. I think UCLA did well. I'm happy for Chip Kelly that they were able to make a statement and win their bowl game and finish with a respectable 8-5 record. Going into next year after there were rumors circulating of him being fired and all of that. And I think UCLA is a team that is hopefully on the up.
Yeah. It was a great showing from UCLA. Chip Kelly. I mean, the big thing is that Chip Kelly secured another year, I believe. At the end of the day, Chip Kelly's job is retained. The Bruins, they again handled business well. I mean, it was just I think it was a well-rounded game. I mean, there were some parts that were interesting, but Boise State, I don't think UCLA wanted them to score 22 on them. I think UCLA was trying to make a statement here, but it was a good game nonetheless.
Yes, and perhaps the most interesting, at least from an analyst perspective, was Texas State
Radiance.
versus Cal in the Radiance Technologies Bowl.
Sure.
And how about Baron Morton, the quarterback from Texas State or Texas Tech? Oh my gosh. So I mean, it was very different from the Texas Tech that we've seen to this point in the season. Very
Oh,
a
yeah.
run-based offense with Taj Brooks. But I mean, they were able to thump Cal with a very successful passing attack. And I mean, to me, it was a great showing. Some crazy catches and just a very dominant offensive performance, a very different, more balanced offensive performance. And I think Texas State could do well for themselves in the Big 12 next year. Or
Yeah.
Texas Tech.
Yeah, Tech. Yeah, Texas Tech, I mean, after what they played Texas and got like handed to, like got smoked. This was a very surprising turnaround. I mean, the QB, who do you call Baron Morton, I think is his name.
Yep.
Baron, yeah, 27 for 43 is outstanding. So above 500 passing completion percentage. Basically 250 yards and 3 touchdowns. I mean, it's something, honestly, I wish we would have seen from Texas Tech earlier in the year. I feel like if they would have been if they would have been so cohesive on offense earlier, they would have been a very tough team to play. But I feel like it took them all this time just to get to where they are now. It's too little too late now. And so now it's almost like you have to look forward to, okay, I think we know what direction we're heading to. So next year in the Big 12, I think we can make ripples and we can fight for the title.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's
yeah,
an
yeah.
up for Texas Tech. And they really showed a different side and a different capability of that football team that, to me, enhances it and gives them certainly hope for next year. And I think they'll be a good team in the Big 12, and I think that'll be a very interesting conference next year. So moving on to bowl previews. The first one we have up is the Gasparilla Bowl. Let me consult the old internet here. I'm not exactly sure when this bowl is going to be played.
Yeah, let me check.
Friday the 22nd. The UFC Knights are going to take on the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, and what, at least to me, might as well be called the Highs and Lows Bowl, because both of these teams have been inconsistent and had their problems throughout the year. And I think it'll be a very interesting game. But go ahead and break it down for us, Kirtan.
I mean, most importantly, this is a revenge game for GT. GT lost earlier in the season. And I mean, it's going to be, honestly, it's a revenge match. It's a grudge match for Georgia Tech at this point. Georgia Tech being very inconsistent this year, like you said. But like they've had some bad losses, but then they've also had really good fights. Like I believe Georgia Tech was the team that beat Miami in Miami, if I'm not wrong. And I mean that I find is very impressive from Georgia Tech, especially because Georgia Tech is not known for doing that. And so for this game, I have Georgia. It's really a revenge match for Georgia Tech, but you're taking on the UCF Knights. The UCF Knights this year, again, another above 500 team. And so as of right now, where I'm looking, I believe my prediction for this game is going to be 21-17. The Knights take it.
All right, that is a great, really good prediction there. And I would have to agree with you. I think it's going to be somewhere in that ballpark, but I think there's a couple of keys to this game that I'd like to elaborate on. So Haynes King, the quarterback for Georgia Tech versus the UCF defense, when he has played well and done star quarterback things, Georgia Tech has been a very, very good football team with very high highs. And to me, the next question is, can the Georgia Tech defense force turnovers? Because they've had some issues with not forcing them. And if they can force enough turnovers, then to me, that's going to get the ball into the hands of Haynes King and give him an opportunity to get it down the field, get it to his receivers, and get it in the end zone. Now, the other important key to this game is if Georgia Tech can get the run going. Jamal Haynes, their running back, their lead running back, is averaging currently 197 rush yards a game and is leading a Georgia Tech run game that is 16th in the nation. And if they're able to keep it close, they've got a chance, because another interesting stat is that UFC is 2-3, or UCF is 2-3 in games with less than a field goal margin. So I think it'll be a great game, but I've also got UCF. They got higher highs and they're peaking at the right time, and I think they've played better towards the end of the season as opposed to Georgia Tech. The next bowl I've got to break down is the Frisco Bowl, which is going to be UTSA and Marshall. And to me, there's a couple of storylines and headlines for this one, but the UTSA defense headlined by Trey Moore, who's got 14 sacks and 17.5 tackles for loss, as we mentioned earlier on the season. He's transferring, but I believe he will play at this point. Don't think that's final. And I think UTSA is going to win it, and I think Frank Harris, their quarterback, will also have a good showing. But to me, it's not much of a competition, but I think it's a good, kind of preview for potentially things next year for UTSA and hopefully playing for that conference title next year.
Yeah, and I have to agree with you. Trey Moore is a difference maker. He is honestly the key player in this match. My biggest question is, does he choose to play, or does he opt out? Because honestly, now that he's entering the transfer portal, he may not play. But if he does, I think UTSA will handle business in this game. And I have the score being I think 24-17. Same. I think it's a little bit more of a gap. I think it's like a touchdown gap in this game. But this one will be a fun one to watch, I believe. Next up, we have Troy at Duke in the Birmingham Bowl. And for this one, I have the question is, if Duke is ready for this game. I mean, let's be honest, I don't believe that Riley Leonard is going to play. And so your biggest question is, are you ready for this game? Because your quarterback is opting out. You have so many people in the transfer portal right about now that I don't think Duke will be a team. I don't know the best way to word this. I would have to say Duke will not be prepared in this match because Duke has so many other things going on, especially with no quarterback in right now. You have multiple players. I believe your running back, starting running back, or wide receiver. I think all these players are transferring out, and it's leaving Duke in almost a shambles, where they don't know what to do. And so for this game, I think prediction for me is 17-10 Troy.
All right. So to me, there's kind of, two keys. As you've mentioned, the Duke opt-outs. To me, that's a huge deal. They're not going to have Riley Leonard, who has been the difference for them in so many games this year. He's been key to them. And the other side is I think Troy is, looking up. They lost their head coach, John Sumrall, to Tulane. And I think they're coachless, but they don't care. I have them getting it done, and I think that's going to be a fairly low-scoring one, but I think it's going to be probably 21-7 Troy.
Yeah. All right. What do we have next? Next we have JMU at Air Force in the Armed Forces Bowl. And I don't know about you. I didn't get that much down for this game, but all I know is James Madison University has had an outstanding year. Emphasis on outstanding, because I believe they were 11-1, 10-1 this year, with their only loss being to App State. And I feel like for any group of 5 team, that is an amazing feeling. Just to know that you're 10-1. Some people, they were ranked high for a while. I think they were top 25 in all in all teams. And so for this game, I didn't get many difference makers down for this game, but for this one, I believe it's almost going to be an emphasis on James Madison showing up and literally showing out and winning the season on a high. And I think it's going to be a stomping against Air Force. I think it's going to be 42-14.
All right. Okay. This is going
Yeah.
to be our first disagreement. So I
Really?
think
See.
that James Madison is going to struggle some with the physicality of Air Force, especially if Air Force plays like they played at the beginning of the season. They were 8-0 until Army happened, and they've been running that classic Service Academy triple option. It's been working well for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Air Force is going to, be the more physical team, be able to kind of set the tone and dominate. And I think it's going to be a very low-scoring affair because I think the Air Force defense is going to be able to contain them, and they're going to have problems. But I think it's going to be, somewhere in the vicinity of 21-14 Air Force.
We'll see. This is a big difference that we have. All right, and then what do you have for the Utah at Northwestern Las Vegas Bowl?
I think this is a big game for Utah. It's kind of slipped under the radar a little bit. Utah has not had a good season. They were picked to be one of the top top contenders, top teams in the Pac-12, and they lost Cam Rising, and then they started losing games. And to me, this is kind of it's a big game for Utah. They're headed to the Big 12 next year. It's kind of, if they win this, they go into the Big 12 on a high note. If they lose it, they don't. And Northwestern is always kind of that middle of the pack Big 10 team that I think will put on a decent showing. But certainly for Utah's sake, I think Utah is going to win it. I think it's going to be a very physical game, but I don't think Northwestern can hang with Utah's characteristic physicality. I've got Utah 28-14.
I agree. We agree on. So, I mean, notable takeaways from this game is Nate Johnson, their quarterback, is expected to hit the transfer portal. Bryson Barnes, another quarterback, he's going to be the one up, so he'll be in for quarterback. Malachi Cope will be out. Fabian Marks will be out. All these are cornerbacks and wide receivers. Though they haven't played that many snaps, Utah's big thing is this has been a letdown year. I mean, the saddest is that Cam Rising, after last year and beating USC, who a lot of people consider USC to be a top team, and beating them in I believe it was the Pac-12 championship. Don't quote me on that. But Cam Rising, he looked very mature. He looked like a very seasoned quarterback at the position, and it's so disappointing to see him go down so early in the season. But I feel like they have a lot of people entering the transfer portal in Utah after this year, and they have one of their main wide receivers. I think his name is Devon Vell. He's also going to opt out of this game, and so really what I have for this game is I think Utah should be able to hold their own as they have players sitting out, but this is almost like a Utes game. It's the Utes game to win. I feel like this is a personal game for them. They want to end out after having such a low year compared to where they thought they were going to be. This would be a game for them to win. I don't know by how much, but as of right now, I say Utes by 6.
All right. So speaking of letdowns, two of the biggest ones, playing in the Orange Bowl, Georgia and Florida State. So I'll break down the game in a minute, but I think the first big question that we have to address and get into here on this edition of the podcast is if Florida State wins, if Florida State goes into this Orange Bowl and leaves with a very, very sweet, not citrusy at all, taste in their mouth, does that prove the committee wrong? Because to me, I think they were, kind of a very much a two evils, no good choice situation. But to me, if Florida State wins this game, then, and even with opt-outs, to me, Florida State can go from saying we should have had a shot to play for the national championship to we would have had a national championship, or that would have been likely if we were in the playoff. And to me, they can go from being robbed of a chance for the championship to being robbed of the actual championship itself with much more credibility.
I agree totally. So yeah, the biggest question is, does the win against Georgia prove the college football committee wrong? I mean, yeah, it's such a hard thing to get into, of course, because there's already been so many people talking about it, but I've just recently learned that Texas was never going to be held out of the playoffs no matter what. So Texas, I believe, was always going to be intended to be the 3 seed. The problem is, I believe a lot of the choice to put Alabama in came from beating Georgia. I think if Georgia would have won this game, I think it would have been a lot easier for the committee. I think there would still be speculation between who's going to get in Texas, who's going to get in Florida State. But the fact that Bama proved themselves against Georgia, who was ranked number 1 for the last 10 weeks, something absurd. I think they fell to 2 against Ohio, or fell to 2 in the rankings. Behind Ohio State for for 1 week. But yeah, this is gonna prove. Do the Seminoles have a case for being in the playoffs if they beat the second best team in the SEC? And does this show to the entire world that the College Football Committee favors those in the SEC, those in the Big Ten, over those in the ACC, those in smaller conferences, essentially?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't know if it's really necessarily showing that they favor, because I think they do favor the SEC, frankly, and the Big Ten, and I think they have a right to. Just from the standpoint, and it's going to get worse next year. So get ready, those of you SEC bias picketers. The difference in talent and quality of program and just potential, and especially along the line of scrimmage in the SEC and to some extent in the Big Ten compared to everywhere else in college football is huge. It's a huge discrepancy, and to me, it's a well-deserved bias, and especially next year, I think there's a chance that a 4-loss SEC team makes it in over a 2-loss ACC team, just because of the degree of strength of schedule, especially looking at the SEC schedules, which we will do in a minute. But yes, I think that it's a bias, and it's just going to get worse as we move from Power 5 to Power 2.5, Power 2. I don't know.
Power 2.
Yeah, something like that. And to me, it's a huge subject, and I think Bama's the better team. I don't think anyone's debating that. And I think this is the closest we've gotten in the 4-team playoff to actually having the 4 best teams in the playoff, which is interesting. And I think it'll certainly be a good thing for us all to watch on New Year's, but I don't necessarily know if it's the best thing for the sport going against the precedent like this. But in terms of the actual game, Georgia's been picked apart by the portal. And to me, and opt-outs as well, I think there's going to be more opt-outs that we haven't even seen yet, like Brock Bowers and
Malachi Starks.
Right, and a bunch of other big names for Georgia. And I think Florida State is going to – I don't think anyone's opting out at Florida State, or very few. I think they're going to put their head down, and I think they're going to win in a very gritty victory. I don't think the score is going to be super high. They are certainly outmatched in talent by Georgia, but I think they're going to make up for it with sheer we missed out motivation.
Yeah, and so just some things I want to highlight is – yeah, there will be many opt-outs. Like you said, these are the 4 best teams you believe these are the 4 best teams in college football playoff? Well, I have 2 questions. In a previous segment, we talked about Jordan Travis and how you talked about how he was the main offensive generator for the team. Didn't you say they averaged 6 more points with him on the field?
16, yeah.
16, yeah. Do you believe that Florida State should have made it at all? In general, do you think Florida State should have made it, or do you think the College Football Committee made the right choice in not letting them in because Jordan Travis got injured? That's my first question. And then my second question is, if you believe these are the 4 best teams, take the scenario. If someone put a gun to your head right now and said, pick who wins, Washington Huskies or the Georgia Bulldogs, would you pick Washington?
No, of course not. I said it's the closest we've been, not that it is the 4 best teams. I think, yeah, Georgia would be in there, and I think that's probably the biggest change. You could make an argument for Washington being in over Texas or something like that, right?
Yeah.
But to me, I think Georgia, if it was truly the 4 best teams, and I also, to talk to your earlier point, I think Florida State should have been in. I think that with or without Jordan Travis, I know it's listed in the committee's criteria that we have to evaluate it based on players, their availability, if they're injured or not, right? To me, I don't think they should take that criteria out. Obviously, it's a 12-team playoff. It's not gonna transfer over to the next year, and I think that's part of why they put Bama in. But I think Florida State should have gotten in, and to me, I mean, they were robbed. I mean, it's a bad choice, Florida State versus Bama, because they're both good teams, and both teams that obviously Bama more than Florida State would have the ability to win the national championship. But no, I think Florida State should have been in. And I also think every single person in the Michigan Wolverines organization thinks Florida State should have been in.
I think they wish Florida State got in.
Yeah, that too.
I mean, yeah, so just to wrap up the segment, it's an impossible choice, to be honest, between Florida State and Alabama, because you're always going to get speculation from both sides. One saying that I went undefeated, I deserve to be in. The other saying that we're a better team. And so if the committee is going strict off of who are the best teams, honestly, I would have to pick Crimson Tide by almost a blowout against Florida State if it was for, like, to get in or like a win or a must-win situation. I think Bama would blow them out. But the committee, they don't work like that. They pick, or it's been shown for the last couple of years that they pick teams that they believe have the best resume to get in. Like last year, did TCU have a better resume to get in over Bama? And how did TCU stay at the 3 spot? Like, I don't believe TCU should have made it last year. And I think that's the problem. I think with the 12 team, like you said, it's going to be a lot easier to let people in. There won't be these situations. But if I had to make a pick for this Orange Bowl game, even with Brock Bowers sitting out, even with Malachi Stark sitting out, even with one of the Georgia offensive tackles sitting out, I still believe that Georgia will come out of this game victorious. And I believe they'll win only by 7. I think it'll just be 21-14.
All right. Prediction. Well, that was I think that'll be a great game, and I certainly watch it. It is certainly must-see television.
Yeah.
And next we go to the coaching carousel.
Yeah.
So Texas A&M, obviously the big headline, firing Jimbo Fisher, replacing him with Mike Elko. Manny Diaz is headed from Penn State to Duke. He was a coordinator at Penn State, and he will take the reins of the Blue Devils. Kurt Cignetti is going to be the new hire at Indiana. Houston is going to be led by Tulane previous head coach Willie Fritz. Bobby Petrino is headed back to Arkansas to be the offensive coordinator there. Jeff Lebby is now going to coach at Mississippi State, their head coach. And then Troy's John Summerall, as we talked about earlier, is headed to Tulane. Just some quick thoughts on what you think this means, and we'll cover this more in detail in a later episode. But just some quick thoughts now.
Just in general about everyone moving, or
yeah.
I mean, it's hard to give quick thoughts on this stuff. I mean, coaches come and go. It just depends on how well you can produce with that team. I think it's good that I feel like it's good that there's a lot of change, a lot of turnover with coaches, especially after a couple of years of failure and not being able to produce at what you were expected to be. And so I'm happy that we're getting turnover and Mike Elko coming over. The Penn State coordinator is heading over to Duke, I believe, right, to be that coach.
Yes.
And I feel like that's good because these guys are getting their opportunity to now take on their own team. But this is a common thing that happens over and over and over again throughout years. We've seen this with Texas turning over from I think it was Herman, right? Tom Herman or something Herman,
Yep.
and to now Sark. It's just coaches will always come and go as long as the school can say that they are underproducing or not showing up to the levels which they were supposed to be. So, what are your thoughts on this also?
I mean, I think there are some very good moves in here. Um, Specifically, I think Jeff Lebby will be a good fit for Mississippi State, creating that physical Mississippi State team that represents and emulates the best teams that they've had. I think Mike Elko will succeed at Texas A&M. I don't know if it'll be right away, but I'd imagine that he'll get that ship turned around. And I think that'll be good for Texas A&M. I think it was time to make a change, even if it still cost them $77 million. And other than that, I mean, there's still definitely jobs that haven't been decided and will be decided in the bowl games. So to me, it'll be very much something we need to continue talking about and discussing in the future. But it's kind of, I guess, settled down a little bit at the moment. And I think there are some good moves, and we'll reevaluate where programs are in the spring. But I think that there's going to be certainly some programs improving, but I do think that Duke is definitely going to miss Mike Elko. So moving on, Kirtan, who do you got for the championship?
Oh. Well, yeah, for our thoughts on the college football game, first off, we've already covered this. Florida State got snubbed, my bad. Texas is playing Washington. So let's talk about this game first. And NOLA, somehow, Washington is the 2 seed, Texas is the 3 seed, yet it is essentially a home game for the Longhorns.
Yep.
Playing right in Louisiana, right to the east of us. And honestly, this is a favorable matchup for the Longhorns because Longhorns have a top 5 run defense right now. And this game is going to be based off of who is a more high-powered offense, who can score more touchdowns. Because both defenses, I mean, besides the fact that Texas Longhorns have like a top 5 run defense, their secondary, I don't know, you probably know more about this than I do, but I don't think their secondary was that great this year. I think they were decent, but they weren't that great. And so this game is going to come down to playmakers on offense, really honestly playmakers on defense too, and how much pressure can they get on Michael Penix for Texas? How well can they shut down the run game in or for Washington? And then if Texas is going to win this game, it's going to be dominant run defense. It's going to be shutting down Rome Odunze, I believe his name, or Rome Odunze. Going to be shutting him down, and it's going to make Michael Penix uncomfortable. And then on the other side, it's going to be start Texas. Like if you're a Washington fan, it is get Texas to have a rough start, slow them down, make sure, do not let them establish a run game, even though the run game isn't as strong. Do you know that the starting running back is it C.J. Baxter?
Yes, it'll be Baxter. Yeah.
Okay. So I think it's going to be basically don't let Quinn Ewers get hot, because once he gets hot, we've seen what happened in Alabama. I think it'll be a rough day if he gets hot. That being said, I think it's going to be a very high scoring game. I have the score being 42-35 Longhorns. And then you can give us your idea on this one.
Yeah, so I think that I honestly think it's a very interesting matchup, but I think there's kind of two things. There is one, can Washington's receivers, Rome Odunze and Jalen Polk, can they get hot? Can they, can Michael Penix, can they find that connection? Can they work that Washington magic through the air? And secondly, for Washington, how does their offensive line hold up? because if the players like Ethan Burke and Barron Sorrell are able to get back and disrupt the quarterback, Michael Penix has a 20% drop in completion rate when he's hurried or when he's forced to, do things quickly and he's under pressure. And to me, that's going to make the difference in this game. If he is able to sit in the pocket and pick apart the secondary, to me, it is definitely Washington's to lose. But if Texas is able to counter with their own high-powered offense and keep Penix, kind of locked down, then to me, it's definitely Texas's game. I think it's right to favor Texas. And I think Texas is going to win 49-42.
Okay, so we're both taking the over. Yeah. And then moving on to the Rose Bowl. In California, we have the Wolverines taking on the Crimson Tide. And this game, I feel like Bama's taking it again. I think Bama's heading back to the chip. And the reason I say this is because I think Bama has grown as a team. They've grown on an exponential rate. They're climbing. Who do you call it? I think Jalen Milroe, if there was a top 6 for the Heisman Award, I think Jalen Milroe would have slid in at 6, to be honest, based off what he's done. The question is, can Michigan really cover all of Alabama's weapons? Can they cover Jalen Milroe's running game? And also, will Michigan choke away this game? Will Michigan have another first-round exit in the college football playoffs? Or will they be able to hold back Bama? And for this game, I have it being 24-14 Bama over the Wolverines.
Okay, yeah. So, to me, this game kind of comes down to a couple of key players. First of all is J.J. McCarthy. He's the first big one, the first big player that to me matters the most. If J.J. McCarthy plays to his potential, Alabama's going to have trouble. He's been very good with Roman Wilson and Colston Loveland, given they're not quite the highest caliber of weapons, but they've played very well. When he's played well, their offense has been good. And when they can get that run-pass balance, Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards provide that 1-2 punch to give Michigan the edge. And I think the other thing is going to come down is going to be that Michigan secondary against those Alabama receivers, including Isaiah Bond and obviously against Milroe himself and those key factors. And to me, I think that it is certainly Alabama's game to lose. I think they're the more talented team. But I believe that Michigan, and I think this is Michigan's time. I think that it's kind of now or never for them. They've gotten to this point so many times. They're such a well-coached and well-cultured team that I think I've got to back the blue. I have Michigan winning it 30-27 in a very close game.
That is respectable. I can see how that works. I mean, that game, if you're really looking at a key difference maker, I think it's a quarterback matchup. If J.J. McCarthy can get back to can he enter into like how he plays against Ohio State? Can he get into that mode? Because honestly, I think Blake Corum is a top 3 running back in the entire college football. He's a tank. And so, yeah, I see how you can favor Michigan in that game, but I think it's just out coaching. I think Nick Saban he's built such a dynamic way for this team to play, especially because Tua, he would scramble a little bit. Jalen Hurts would scramble a little bit, but Jalen Milroe is a run-first quarterback, I believe. I believe he's changed the way Alabama looks at how they look at their playbook, and they've opened more options for him to run. And I think Isaiah Bond is going to be a definite threat. And so I can see how you would take the blue, but I think I'm going to have to back the Crimson on this one. Do you want to get into college football, what do you call it, champion in general, or do you want to keep that for a later episode?
Let's go ahead and save it, give you a little teaser, a little reason to tune in again.
Yeah.
And the last thing to talk about is that the SEC schedules were released, and I've got a couple of key SEC matchups that I think will be very interesting. And I'm also going to get your thoughts on 8 versus 9 game conference schedule and what you think. But the key matchups I've got is Bama and Georgia playing each other in the regular season next year, which is fascinating to me. I think Georgia's got a tougher schedule than Bama does. But I think it'll be a very interesting game between kind of these two titans and a rematch of the SEC championship this year, which is going to be a very key game in determining the landscape of the larger SEC next year. And then the next game I have that is kind of key and that's coming back, that's new, that's different, that we haven't seen before. Not necessarily kind of that's just, it's the biggest gauntlet, but Texas and Texas A&M. They haven't played for a long, long time. It's a huge rivalry. It's going to be restored on rivalry weekend. Unfortunately, as of right now, it's not happening on Thanksgiving, but that could change. Hopefully, we've got our fingers crossed. But I think it'll be a great game. I think it'll be kind of a test for both sides, but also I think it's just kind of a very much a celebration of a key rivalry that will be played again. And then the third thing that I have to get out there is Florida's November. I believe you referred to it earlier as no-win November.
Yeah.
November 2nd, Georgia comes to them. November 9th, they go to Texas. November 16th, they go to the LSU comes to them. November 23rd, Ole Miss comes to them. And November 30th, they go to Florida State. Now, I think that is 5 playoff team games in a row in the month of November. 5.
Mm-hmm.
Now, considering that next year it's a 12-team playoff, I think all of those teams will be in the playoff. I think they're all contenders for the playoff, and I think most of them will be in the playoff. And to me, that's crazy. I think it's the wildest, month of a schedule I've ever seen, especially in the back half. And if Florida can survive the gauntlet that is the rest of their schedule and even if they just win 1 or 2, and this, to me, Florida is probably a playoff team, even at 8-4 or 9-3, which is crazy to think about, but it's that hard of a schedule. And then the other 2 key matchups I've got are Georgia at Texas, which is going to be a showdown. Kind of put your money on the line, place your bets now, folks. Showdown. They haven't played in quite a while, and it'll be a very interesting new game and certainly a test for Texas along with their trip to Michigan out of conference. 2 playoff teams playing each other in week 2 of next year, which is something to look forward to. And then the last matchup I've got is Missouri and Oklahoma, which is fascinating to me. And I think it's going to be it's a good game. Missouri's going to be a good team. I think they'll be a similar caliber of team next year. Oklahoma might be a little more talented, but I think Missouri will be right there with them. And I think that'll be a fascinating in-conference SEC matchup. But what exciting games do you have for next year?
I mean, the SEC is going to be crazy next year. Let's kick it off. So I wrote down my top 5. And let's start with number 1. Number 1 is going to be the Red River Battle, or the Red River rivalry. I feel like this is always just such an energetic game. It's always high scoring. And I think Oklahoma's had a down year, especially after bad losses. But again, they beat Texas, only lost to Texas. And so it's always just a good matchup for both teams. They both come in playing tough. And so no matter how this goes, I think, honestly, as of right now, I would say Oklahoma is a playoff team and then 12 team. And so at my number 5, I have Oklahoma. At number 4, I have Texas versus Georgia. So Texas here, honestly, I would have to give advantage to Texas. Texas being ranked number 4 right now. Quinn Ewers returning, although on the other hand, Carson Beck will return. And it's in Texas. And so looking at it, Texas got off light, I'm not going to lie. Compared to the other schedules that they have, the only hard matchup that y'all really have to look at is y'all versus versus Michigan in Ann Arbor. But besides that, I think when the money line does come out, I believe it'll be Texas -3. But I'm not going to count out the best team in the nation. You know, I can't do that to them. I can't.
Oh, the
count out.
bias. The bias is skyrocketing.
Nah, it's
You're
not the
starting
bias.
to
It's
lose it
just
here.
the truth, man. You can't count out the 2-time Natty Chip winners. Happens to be back to back, And so at my 4, I got Georgia, Bama. At 3, it's gonna be an old one or a weird one, I guess. It's gonna be Oklahoma versus Alabama. And the reason I have this one is it's gonna be similar to Texas, Georgia. Oklahoma, it's gonna be a great test for them, especially because it's gonna be in Sooner Stadium, and it's just gonna be in their inaugural season against Alabama. I don't think Oklahoma's faced a team as good as Bama in a while, besides from Texas. And I think it'll just be a fun matchup to watch. I don't know why, but I feel like there's going to be an upset potentially, and I have Oklahoma winning that game in Oklahoma. 2, we have to go back to Texas A&M, Texas. I mean, electrifying is the word for this game. This is a resurgence of a rivalry. Everyone's going to be happy. It's going to be feuds. It's going to be Gig 'em versus Hook 'em. And it's Kyle Field this year, I believe, right?
By playing College Station, yep.
Yeah, and if I'm wrong, isn't that where they hosted the last time they met? Yeah, and so, I mean, that seems going to be rocking. That might be a game I need to try to find tickets to because that's going to be a crazy one. A&M's going to try to give Texas a welcome to the SEC, but the way it's shaping out with A&M losing lots of talent, including Walter Nolan, I got Texas winning that. And then lastly, the biggest matchup is the Bulldogs versus the Tide. This is the first time they're meeting because one team is in the East, one team is in the West. This is the first time they're meeting in an actual game, in a regular season game. I mean, this one could go either way. I mean, 2 really tough teams, 2 physical teams, 2 teams with the best recruiting year in year out, and this game, I don't know how it's going to go. It's in Tuscaloosa, so I believe it's going to be favored towards Bama. But the fact that we get to watch this game on September 28th, I don't know what week that is. I think that's like week 4, week 3, or like one of the kickoff weeks. I mean, that's just amazing to watch. That's going to be a way to kick off the SEC. And then the segment where we just talked about Florida's schedule, right? You did?
Yes.
Yeah, no win November is going to take place. And this is going to be a make or break year for Billy Napier. Georgia, they play in a neutral site, actually, because this is the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. That's the name of their rivalry. And so that'll be a neutral site. That's a Georgia win. LSU, or they play Texas next, right? At Texas. They're dying. LSU I think they're in Baton Rouge, or they're not in Baton Rouge, they're in the swamp against LSU. I mean, there's not much you can say. It's Georgia number 6 as of right now. Texas number 4 or number 3. I mean, LSU I think was 12. Ole Miss is somewhere in there, 12 through 10 through 15. Florida State number 5. All those teams, it's just going to be a tough battle. And I think if he can win one game, Billy Napier can come out with one game, he might be able to secure a job for next year. Because I don't think many people are expecting Florida to win a game that month, but I'd have to say if he can pull off one win, I don't care who it's against. It could be LSU, it could be Georgia. He will get life. He'll get more recruits. He'll have a good year, I think. Just one win in November. And then I asked a couple people this question, and I wasn't able to get a solid response. And so this is my last question I have for you. Take Ohio State this year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Number what were they? 7 or 6? 7, right?
7.
Is it better that they did not make the conference championship? And we're planning this next year, right? Is it better that they do not make the conference championship? They secured the 7th seed, and they did not risk an injury in the in the Big Ten championship. Because what would happen if Blake Corum, JJ McCarthy go into that game and snap their leg? Is it better that the fact that Ohio State doesn't have to play for the Big Ten championship, they get an extra week to rest, and they're essentially guaranteed a playoff spot, especially being the Power Two in a Power Two conference?
For next year,
Yeah.
yes, I would say so. While I love the conference championship game, I mean, there's going to be, to me, the 12-team playoff dilutes the meaning of regular season games to some degree. You can lose one, or in the case of Florida State, you can't lose one. You can lose one, but you can't lose two, right? It takes it from that mentality, from that, oh, we can mess up once, but if we do it again, we're done mentality, to oh, yeah, well, we can, all we're foregoing is the 1 through 4 seeds. Like, okay, we get a 6 seed, big deal. We'll just whoop up on whatever team and, work our way through the bracket. But, yes, I think it is more favorable for them in terms of just sheer playoff performance and not play. Because they're probably not going to get the 1 seed anyway. It's going to be an SEC team, most likely. So it would be, to me, it would be better for them if they were to just obviously they're not going to purposely lose to Michigan. That would be ridiculous.
Yeah.
But if they do, getting that rest week, yes, that would be good for the team. And with that, I'd like to thank you for listening to this edition of the Beyond the Snap podcast with Kieran and Kirtan. You can always email us if you have any questions, concerns, corrections, topics, anything, beyondthesnapfootball@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah,
Bye.
and special thanks to JD Piquel and On the Hard Count and Josh Pate, because I use them for a lot of my research. I know you watch them too. But yeah, like Kieran said, thank you for watching this game. And yeah, if you have any questions, please email. If you want any scenarios we can give you, please email. And like Kieran said, have a great day and tune in next time.